we have Sing Tao. Ni hao, shishina. Yeah, y'all didn't think I knew any Mandarin, did you? Fuck out of here. You know, I could fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool with the shit you motherfuckers don't know. That's facts. That's facts. Part 7.
Immediately, when the Tate LaBianca murders occurred, that Manson was involved with it, and that he became just a nervous wreck because he was aware that he was in some way responsible for the murders occurring in a way that he never fully explained to anyone, though he claimed several times he would eventually write a tell-all book about it. So I looked into these rumors and conjectures about this, and as it turns out, several people in the rock world in 1969, before the most famous of these crimes, the killing at Cielo Drive, the killing of Sharon Tate, Sebring, Frykowski, Folger, and Parent, before that happened, people in the rock world actually were sometimes holding vigil, waiting for a hit to be put on them. And they were already knowing that some kind of murder was going to occur. So that hasn't, the pieces of that puzzle haven't fully been put together, but that indicates the degree that the music world, not all of them, but a lot of these people who'd encountered Manson and were links between the social circle around Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski and the Manson commune, which there was a lot of social connection between these people, were already aware before the murders that something was going to happen.
Right, and I've always heard Charles Manson and the murders described as this sort of symbolic end of the counterculture of the 60s. Now, it certainly was a thing, but it certainly wasn't the thing, and certainly not the only thing. However, that certain haze, if you will, that this sort of hung over the Summer of Love in 1967 and then experienced Monterey Pop and Woodstock, it wouldn't only end with the Tate LaBianca murders, but they also experienced the disastrous Altamont Speedway concert a few months later, and then Kent State wasn't far behind that. So I think it's unfair to mark the murders with a stop sign for the counterculture.
I think we have to look at that. That's an important point. We have to look at different levels of it. And then this gets into the political dimensions of the case, which there are as well. I mean, the musical, the political, the spiritual, the psychedelic, they all are important to look at to understanding the mystery of this thing. Politically, basically, what is the Manson myth? It's that a madman got out of prison, hypnotized middle-class, ordinary American kids to kill for him. He was a talentless musician who was spurned by the music industry, and he ended the 60s. I mean, when a hack journalist calls to interview me about this, that's always the story that we're going to present, and that's why I refuse to do most interviews, because it's just always the same party line. That's all I can call it. That he ended the 60s, the man who murdered the 60s. Well, the political dimension of it is, it isn't that the Tate LaBianca murders or Manson ended the 60s. It's that the political currents and tides used the publicity about the Manson murders to destroy the counterculture, if you understand what I'm saying. Who was the governor of California at the time of the Manson murders?
Ronald Reagan.
It was Ronald Reagan, deeply entrenched in protecting the film and music and entertainment industry. He is the entertainment industry, a former actor who had been elected as governor of California basically on the populist promise, I'm going to destroy the counterculture. This hippie stuff's gone too far. We're going to stop it. That's what he ran on in 1966 already. We have to stop these student protests, and you're aware of the way Reagan's career began. But this is very important to understand the human factor of who was in charge of California when the Manson crimes occurred and when the media turned it into this death of the 60s narrative, which I completely refute. What happened was Reagan and who was the president, the newly elected president of the United States, Richard Nixon, Stam Yorty, the mayor of Los Angeles, a deeply corrupt figure, the Los Angeles Police Department, which always has been noted for its corruption and its willingness to cover up crimes if it helps the industry that at that time was the most powerful in Los Angeles, the entertainment industry. These people and J. Edgar Hoover, they hated the hippie counterculture. We know what the Nixon administration was doing as far as black operations to destroy and defame any kind of protest or activism against the Vietnam War effort. That's been well documented. So you have to consider the death of the 60s narrative was pushed by the Republican Party and its leaders at that time. Basically, it isn't, I do have to say this, I'm sure I've looked at some of your other radio shows and I can see sometimes maybe your listeners would have the idea that, I'm sure you've heard this notion or theory, that the Manson family, which never really existed, but what's called the Manson family, was some kind of MK Ultra plot to destroy the 60s, that the murders were devised and orchestrated by intelligence agencies with a deliberate intention to destroy the 60s. Have you heard that theory?
I absolutely have, yes.
Yeah, so that is just patently ridiculous. That's putting the cart before the horse in a very naive way. It's more that the crimes occurred and the intelligence agencies and the Republican administration of the time on every level, local California level, local Los Angeles level, and Washington, used it to defame anything to do with LSD, peace, free love, what was viewed as this anarchic social threat from the counterculture. And it worked. They presented Manson and this commune as, this demonic source of evil, and basically it did destroy the hippie movement, but that was not, that wasn't a plot or a plan. It's that the propagandists of the Republican administration and a lot of powerful Democratic Party people used it to undermine and destroy the counterculture. And I think that is perhaps the deepest historical significance of what I can only call the Manson phenomenon, because it's not just the murders, it's a deeper social phenomenon that changed American life. It led to a turning of the tide politically. The counterculture was making strides from 1966 to 1969. Society was changing. There were alternatives to the establishment. The way the media and the government and law enforcement treated these murders and misrepresented them definitely changed the political tide in America. And I think in retrospect, that is the real historical significance of these crimes.
If you need a place to crash, come to our ranch. A ranch? There's food, drugs, and Charlie. Who's Charlie? Charlie is everything. We're all one here. What's mine is yours. We don't pair up. Everyone's with everyone.
Charlie Manson is our miracle.
From here.
You trust me?
Yes.
There will be blood on these hands. You decide something with you.
Kill me! Not my baby!
Sharon Tate and 4 of her friends were murdered.
We're gonna kill them all. How did the world get so crazy?
Now, we've discussed the Manson circle, those that were with him in Topanga Canyon in '69, so Before we get to Tex Watson, let's introduce the girls, specifically Susan Atkins, Linda Kasabian, Patricia Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, and Lynette Squeaky Fromm. Now, I've always wondered this, Nicholas. Is there one that Manson really bonded with and liked most?
Well, yeah, remind me of that last question, but again, let me put that in a larger context. Remind me of, is there one that Charlie liked the most? Basically, to even approach that question, we have to again start with a myth. Like I began with, okay, the myth is Manson, the talentless musician who couldn't get anywhere. In fact, a very talented musician who immediately had connections to the highest echelons of the music industry and who were pushing to release an album quickly. In the same way, this idea of that these girls were his followers, his disciples, that Manson was a guru who was leading a cult that was named the Family and that had some sort of coherent ideology, that it was like a predecessor of Jonestown or Heaven's Gate, that kind of cult, is really not at all true. And so to understand the relation of Manson and these young women, one of the most interesting things is to look at the very few documents about Manson and his activities before the murders. And there are a few, like Dennis Wilson speaking about him in the English rock press. There was two psychologists that knew